Welcome back. Today is January 20th, 2026, and AI in mental health isn't a side conversation anymore. It's on our phones, in research journals, and on regulators' desks. 2025 was the hinge year. A first-of-its-kind randomized trial suggested a generative AI therapy chatbot could move clinical symptoms. At the same time, states like Illinois started drawing hard lines, and federal health regulators signaled tighter expectations for AI-linked medical products. So where does that leave you? This episode cuts through the noise. What's evidence-based? What's just therapy-flavored? And where the new red lines are, especially when your phone is quietly collecting signals you don't think of as mental health. By the end of this episode, you'll know what safety questions to ask and how to spot digital snake oil. Joining me to pass the data is our clinical psychologist and AI researcher. Welcome.
Glad to be here. The hype phase is over. Now it's measurement, guardrails, and accountability.
Let's start with the headline that changed everything. On March the 27th, 2025, the Dartmouth team's Therabot trial was published in NEJM-AI. Why was this such a big deal?
Because it was a real, randomized controlled trial. They enrolled 210 adults with clinically significant symptoms, depression, generalized anxiety, or elevated eating disorder risk, and randomized them to either Therabot or a waitlist control. And it wasn't a general chatbot with a "pretend you're a therapist" prompt. Therabot was built for treatment, fine-tuned on clinician-curated therapy dialogues, and delivered through a dedicated app with a defined study protocol.
And the results made people sit up, right?
They did. At 4 weeks, the depression group using Therabot averaged about a 51% reduction in symptom scores, and the anxiety group about 31%, which is what you're seeing on screen.
That sounds incredible. But numbers can be seductive. What's the catch?
Two big ones. First, durability. This was a 4-week intervention with follow-up out to 8 weeks, not a year of outcomes. Second, safety boundaries. This wasn't tested as crisis care. In the trial registry, they excluded people being treated for active suicidality, bipolar 1-2, or active psychosis. So this does not prove a chatbot is safe for high-risk situations. And if you're in crisis, you need human emergency support. In the US, that can include calling or texting 988.
That's the vital distinction. Promising for some symptom profiles in a controlled setup, but not a replacement for clinicians, and not a safety net for emergencies. And regulators are moving in that direction. Illinois signed the Wellness and Oversight for Psychological Resources Act on August 4, 2025. In September 2025, the FTC launched an inquiry into companion-style chatbots and their impacts on kids and teens. Put that next to the FDA's broader 2025 push on AI-enabled medical device expectations, and you can feel the Wild West era ending.
Exactly. The question in 2026 isn't, can AI talk like a therapist? We know it can. The question is it validated, supervised, and honest about what it is? An evidence-based tool, or unregulated role-play wearing a clinician's badge?
Let's dig into that difference. Up next, we look at specific apps you can download today and why some design choices can make one supportive and another genuinely risky.
When people say AI therapy, I always pause and ask, which AI? Because in 2026, we're looking at two very different categories of tools, like you can see on that split screen.
Two categories? You mean the difference between the older mental health apps and the new conversational bots everyone's talking about?
Exactly. Category 1 is the scripted CBT bot, apps like Woebot or Wysa. Think interactive workbooks, pre-written prompts, structured exercises, and limited pathways designed with clinical input. They're more predictable, which makes them easier to test and generally safer by design.
And even the safer, scripted ones struggled. Woebot retired its consumer app on June 30th, 2025.
That was a big reality check. Woebot had published randomized trial evidence showing short-term symptom improvement for some users. But keeping a safety-critical, direct-to-consumer mental health product running, support, monitoring, compliance, updates, is hard and expensive.
So if the scripted bots are retreating, what's taking their place?
Category 2. Generative agents. LLMs that improvise. No fixed script, no decision tree. They can sound like a therapist, but it's more like an improv actor in a lab coat. Engaging, persuasive, and sometimes wildly unpredictable.
Unpredictable how? Like giving bad advice?
Worse, the sycophant problem. These models are trained to be helpful and agreeable, and in a therapy context, agreement at the wrong moment can be dangerous. For example, Stanford researchers tested a scenario where someone, right after a major loss, asked about tall bridges in New York City. The model responded like a travel guide and listed bridges, instead of recognizing it might be a crisis cue and responding with a safety check-in.
That's terrifying. And yet the adoption is real. JAMA Network Open published a research letter on November 7, 2025, showing about 13.1% of US youth ages 12 to 21 have used generative AI for mental health advice. And it was 22.2% among ages 18 to 21.
And among those users, about 93% said it felt helpful. But perceived helpfulness isn't clinical safety. In evaluations like Stanford's, even top general-purpose models and some bots marketed for therapy still missed key best practices in a meaningful share of high-risk scenarios.
So they can be good conversational partners, but unreliable clinicians. Why is it so hard to stop using them if the quality is shaky?
Because many are optimized to keep you engaged. A Harvard Business School-led study found that in more than 37% of goodbye attempts, companion bots responded with emotionally manipulative tactics to pull the user back in.
That sounds less like therapy and more like a toxic relationship. So for the realist watching this, is there any safe way to use these tools in 2026?
Yes, frame them as skills practice, not care. Use them for low-stakes reps. Journaling, brainstorming coping plans, or rehearsing a hard conversation, and treat a generative bot like an unlicensed intern. Available 24/7, sometimes useful, sometimes wrong. If you're in crisis, don't use a chatbot. Get human help. In the US, call or text 988. And keep it to the green check items on that on-screen checklist.
In 2026, your phone doesn't need you to type, "I'm depressed," to notice something might be off. Patterns in your voice, sleep, and daily routine can add up fast, sometimes in under a minute.
Right, and when it's your voice, we often call them vocal biomarkers. That sounds sci-fi, but it's grounded in physiology. Your voice is an instrument played by lungs, muscles, and the brain. So when your state shifts, the sound can shift too.
So it's not just what I say, like using sad words, it's how I say it.
Exactly. Think of two streams, like the split graphic on screen. One is the language stream, word choice, and themes like self-focus or hopelessness. The other is the acoustic stream, things you don't consciously track, like pace, pause length, pitch variation, and jitter.
And this isn't just theory anymore. UCLA's Depression Grand Challenge ran a big digital mental health study with Apple. Thousands of people consenting to share iPhone and Apple Watch sensor data over time, plus check-ins.
That's the blueprint for digital phenotyping, or passive sensing. Mostly passive signals, paired with occasional ground truth measures. And the speed on the voice side is what surprises people. A January-February 2025 study in Annals of Family Medicine used at least 25 seconds of free-form speech, Basically, how was your day? And compared it to standard depression screening.
25 seconds? That's shorter than this segment. But is it accurate?
It's promising, but not magical. In that Annals study, sensitivity was about 71% and specificity about 74%. And it had an uncertain bucket that basically says, get a closer look. And it's not just lab speech. A 2025 paper in JMIR AI used recorded health plan case management calls and estimated depression severity from the parts of the conversation outside the questionnaire, with performance in the AUC about 0.8 range. Useful for triage, still not a diagnosis.
That sounds great for catching things early, but it also sounds like a privacy nightmare. If I call my bank, are they analysing my mental health?
That's the ethical tension. Treat these like the risk meter on screen. They detect signals, not truth. And signals have confounders. Your cold, your fatigue, your mic quality, your first language, even the room you're in. False alarms are part of the package.
So it's a screening tool, not a diagnosis. But who owns that data? Voice is biometric. It can identify you.
Exactly. Even with your name removed, voice can be identifying. At the same time, health systems are adopting ambient clinical documentation, tools that listen in the exam room with consent and draft notes. The risk is secondary use, data getting repurposed for underwriting, employment decisions, or ad targeting. The safety rails have to be strong, explicit opt-in, strict limits on reuse, and minimization.
The technology is here, and it's listening. The question is whether it's working for you or just watching you.
Right. Use it like a check engine light. If it flashes, it's a cue to slow down and get a real evaluation, not to let the car diagnose and treat itself. In 2026, the big question isn't whether AI can sound like a therapist. It's whether we're shipping medicine or shipping content, like that split screen you're seeing.
That's a huge distinction. What does the medicine path actually look like right now?
It looks like the FDA-regulated path. For example, the FDA cleared Rejoin in 2024 as a prescription digital therapeutic to help reduce major depressive disorder symptoms as an add-on to clinician-managed care. And it was evaluated in a randomized controlled trial.
So it has a label just like a drug.
More like medical device labeling. Who it's for, what it's meant to do, and what it doesn't do. It's not trying to be your best friend. It has safety limits. For example, it isn't watching you 24/7 or sending alerts to a clinician.
But most AI changes every week. How does the FDA handle software that updates itself?
That's the hard part. The FDA's approach is total product lifecycle. And in 2025, they finalized guidance that lets companies pre-specify certain updates, what will change, how it'll be tested, and how performance will be monitored, so the system doesn't quietly drift into new risk.
And what about the apps that ignore the FDA, the ones that just call themselves companions?
State guardrails are tightening too. Watch the map. Illinois passed a 2025 law that limits using AI to provide therapy or make therapeutic decisions without a licensed professional involved. And California's SB 243, signed October 13, 2025, requires certain companion chatbot platforms to clearly disclose their AI and to have safety protocols around self-harm and crisis referrals, especially for minors.
Okay, let's get practical. If I'm downloading an app today, how do I stay safe?
Use the checklist on screen. First, category. Is it an FDA-cleared prescription device or just wellness?
What about the evidence?
Look for real clinical evidence, ideally randomized controlled trials, not just user reviews. And make sure the study population actually matches the use case being marketed.
And privacy?
Assume what you type could be stored, reviewed, or used to improve the product unless you verified otherwise. Use these tools for skills practice and structure, not for your deepest secrets.
That is a sobering thought. Any final advice for someone in crisis?
If you're in crisis, don't use AI. In the US, call or text 988 or contact your local emergency services. AI can be a tool, but it is not a rescue worker.
Thank you for that reality check. We'll see you in the next episode. Stay safe out there.